The alien dreadnought Zajul moved slowly across the deep black of space, its dark metal surface reflecting almost no light, making it look like a shadow drifting among the stars. Inside the massive command bridge, Admiral Korvac stood with his hands behind his back, watching the star map on the main display. The borderline of human space glowed red on the screen, a thin, invisible line in the endless darkness. Korvac's crew whispered about the rumors they had heard. They spoke of ghost ships, of human warships that moved faster than light could, touch of hunters who never spoke before they killed. But Korvac did not believe in ghost stories. He had fought many wars, defeated many fleets, and crushed countless enemies. In his mind, the humans were just another young species with too much pride. The dreadnought was a monster of a ship, 5 kilometers long, armed with plasma cannons, railguns, and enough missile launchers to destroy a small moon. It had thick armor that had survived the suns of dying stars. Its engines could outrun most fleets in the galaxy. Korvac believed nothing could touch it. "Human space ahead, Admiral," said the navigation officer, a tall alien with silver skin and deep, black eyes. Korvac nodded slowly, his lips curling into a faint smile. "Cross it," he said. The officer hesitated. "Sir, the warnings." But Korvac cut him off. "We are the Shar Dominion. No human will dare to stop us." A faint vibration moved through the ship as it crossed the border. The crew felt it in their bones. It was nothing physical, no weapon, no shield. But it felt wrong. The stars outside seemed sharper, brighter, and at the same time colder. Several of the younger crew members shifted nervously in their seats. On the comm system, a message crackled to life. The voice was flat, calm, and human. "Unidentified vessel. You have entered human space without permission," the voice said. "Turn back immediately." Korvac smiled wider and motioned to shut the comm off. "Ignore them," he said. The bridge filled with quiet, uneasy glances. The Zajul's long-range scanners picked up something ahead. A single small object drifted in the black. No heat signature, no ID code, no lights. It looked like debris from a forgotten war. "A dead ship," said the sensor officer. Korvac leaned forward. "Tractor it in. We will take a look." The massive dreadnought's grip beams reached out and began pulling the small object closer. As it came into view, the crew saw it was a small vessel, human-made, maybe 20 meters long, its hull scorched and scarred. Pieces of metal floated around it like frozen tears. The ship had no visible weapons, no power, no movement. Some of the crew laughed. "This is their mighty defense?" One of them said. "An old wreck," Korvac said coldly. "If this is what they leave on the border, then they have grown weak." He ordered it brought closer to the hangar, but as the grip beams locked tighter, the small ship flickered. For a moment, it seemed to vanish from the screen. The officers blinked, adjusting the sensors. And then it was there again. One of the younger crew members whispered, "Sir, that was strange." Korvac ignored him. He was thinking of the treasure the humans might be hiding. He thought of the trophies he would take from this space, the fear he would spread across the galaxy. In his mind, human space was nothing but an unguarded garden, waiting for a conqueror. Outside, in the deep black, the small human ship drifted. Silent and still, but something about it seemed wrong. Its angles didn't match the way normal ships were built. It seemed sharper, almost like it was made to disappear into the dark. As the alien crew prepared the hangar to receive the wreck, a single light came on inside the small vessel. A thin, pale glow, barely visible. The hangar officer called it in. "Admiral, the human ship has powered on just a little." Korvac frowned. "Scan it," he ordered. The scans returned nothing, as if the ship's systems were not there at all. "That is impossible," the officer muttered. Suddenly, the lights on the bridge flickered. Only for a second, but long enough for every alien there to feel a shiver down their spines. Korvac turned back to the main display. His smile was gone now. He gave the order to release the human vessel, but the tractor beams refused to disengage. The system showed that the control signals were being overridden from inside the human ship. The small vessel moved, just slightly, twisting in space, until its front faced the dreadnought directly. The glow inside it shifted, growing brighter. A strange vibration filled the air, as if the ship itself was humming. The comm system came alive again without anyone activating it. The same human voice returned, but now it was colder, quieter, and far more dangerous. "You were warned," it said, in that moment. Several things happened at once. The dreadnought's main power grid flickered again. The lights dimmed, and all long-range comms went silent. The bridge crew scrambled to bring systems back online. But nothing responded. The alien officer shouted in panic. While Korvac stared at the screen, the small human vessel was still there, perfectly still, its pale glow now a sharp, piercing white. And then, without any heat or visible thrust, it began to move, faster than their scanners could track. The alien crew's laughter from earlier was gone, replaced with the heavy sound of fear. The rumors they had mocked were beginning to feel real. They were in human space now, and it was clear that something had found them. And whatever it was not going to let them leave. On the far edge of the border, hidden in the cold darkness, between the stars, the human warship Valkyrie hung in silence. It was not large by alien standards, not compared to the massive dreadnought it now hunted, but size had never been the advantage of human ships. Speed, precision, and ruthlessness, those were the tools they used. Captain Elias sat in the command chair, his face calm but his eyes sharp. He had seen the trespass signal the moment the Tsar Joel crossed the border. It was his sector, his responsibility, and his standing orders were simple. Any ship entering human space without permission would not be allowed to leave. No warning, no negotiations, only elimination. The crew of the Valkyrie moved quietly. Their stations glowed faintly in the darkened bridge, giving the place an almost predatory feel. The air was still, but charged with anticipation. Every officer knew what was coming. This was not a patrol anymore. It was a hunt, target acquired, said Lieutenant Marin from the sensor station. Shar Dominion Dreadnought. Designation Tsar Joel, armed to the teeth, scanning our sector. Elias didn't look up from the tactical display. "Do they see us?" Marin shook her head. "Not yet. Wraith Drive is active. We're invisible on all known spectrums." The Wraith Drive, humanity's most closely guarded weapon, it was not just a cloaking device. It bent signals, light, and even certain forms of gravity, making the human ship disappear completely from enemy sensors. Combined with jump burst engines, it allowed the Valkyrie to move like a shadow in a storm. Elias watched the alien ship draw closer to the small decoy vessel drifting in space, the same one he had ordered positioned there weeks ago. It looked like a damaged human patrol craft, powerless and harmless, but inside it was a sensor beacon and a trap. The moment the Tsar Joel pulled it in with their tractor beams, they had effectively tagged themselves. The comms officer turned. In her chair, Admiral Korvac's ship is hailing the decoy. They think it's dead. Elias smirked slightly. Good, let them think that. Bring the core weapon online. A deep, quiet hum filled the Valkyrie, so low it was felt more in the bones than in the ears. Beneath the decks, a weapon was waking, the Helios Lance. A beam of concentrated energy designed to slice through the toughest warship armor in the galaxy. It was not flashy. It did not make a storm of explosions. It was surgical, precise, and unstoppable. Range? Elias asked. 17,000 kilometers, replied Marin. Inside strike window in 60 seconds. Elias leaned back. Helm, keep us dark. Approach on Vector 410. Weapons. Lock primary lance on their main shield array. The Valkyrie slid silently through the void, every movement deliberate. There was no engine flare, no wake. To an outside observer, the ship simply wasn't there. The Tsar Joel loomed ahead, a mountain of metal and death, its hull bristling with weapon mounts and armored plates thicker than most starships were wide. On the alien dreadnought's bridge, Korvac was still smiling, studying the decoy ship as it drifted closer. His officers were reporting no signs of life, no weapons, no power, but that didn't matter now, back on the Valkyrie. Elias waited until the targeting reticle turned from yellow to blood red. The ship's eye gave a single confirmation tone, soft but final. Locked. Fire, Elias said, from the void itself. A thin white beam erupted. There was no sound. In space, but to anyone watching, it was like seeing lightning tear across the night sky. The beam struck the Zarjol's forward shields and tore through them instantly. As if they weren't there at all, the first impact wasn't to destroy. It was to warn. On the alien bridge, alarms screamed. Officers scrambled to identify the source of the attack, but there was nothing on their sensors. No ship, no trace, only the burning wound in their forward shield grid. Korvac's smile was gone, replaced by a thin line of anger. Where did it come from? He barked, "Track it!" But his crew had nothing. The beam had come and gone in less than a second. Elias watched the readouts with cold precision. Shields breached, armor compromised. No counterlock detected, Marin reported. They can't see us, Elias nodded. Good, let's take their eyes first. The Valkyrie blinked out of its current position and reappeared 1,000 kilometers to the starboard flank of the alien ship. The Helios lance fired again, this time cutting straight through the Zarjul. Primary sensor array, the massive dishes and relay towers exploded in silence, drifting into space like broken bones. Inside the alien dreadnought, chaos erupted. They had no idea where the enemy was, and their long-range sensors were gone. Blind and deaf, they were floating in enemy space. "Captain," the comms officer said quietly, "they're trying to send a distress signal." Elias didn't hesitate. "Jam it. No one leaves this place." The Wraith systems flooded the dreadnought's bands with noise, choking every signal on the alien ship. Panic was beginning to replace discipline. Korvac tried to rally his officers, ordering blind. Firing patterns into the void. Plasma bursts and railgun slugs ripped into empty space, wasting precious energy, but every time they fired, the Valkyrie was already somewhere else. Elias knew the hunt had only just begun. This was psychological warfare as much as it was physical. The Zarjol had walked into human space thinking they were predators, now they were prey. The human captain spoke quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. "They came here thinking they'd be remembered for conquest. We'll make sure they're remembered for their end." The Valkyrie circled in the dark, unseen and untouchable, waiting for the next strike. The dreadnought was still armed, still dangerous, but fear was beginning to eat at them from the inside. And Elias knew that fear would do half his work for him before the final blow. The alien dreadnought Zarjul drifted in the cold dark. Massive and armored, yet somehow looking smaller now. Its once confident movements were gone, replaced by slow, uncertain rotations as the crew struggled to regain control. The forward shields were gone, the main sensor array was shattered, and their long-range comms were nothing but static on the Valkyrie. Captain Elias watched them like a predator watching wounded prey. The tactical display showed the Zarjul as a large, glowing shape, its remaining shield systems flickering. Its engines were still strong, its weapons still dangerous, but it was blind. The human ship, hidden by the Wraith drive, moved silently in the black void, invisible to every alien sensor. Status on their weapons? Elias asked. Lieutenant Marin studied her panel. Primary plasma batteries active. Railguns online. Missile bays still sealed. "They're firing blind, Captain. Just throwing energy into space." Elias nodded. "They're scared. Keep them." That way, on the alien bridge, Admiral Korvac gripped the arm of his command chair. The humans had struck twice, fast, precise, and without warning. No ship he knew of could move like that. He had fought many enemies, but this was different. This was not war. This was a hunt. And he knew who was the hunter. "Deploy recon drones," Korvac ordered. His officers obeyed quickly, launching dozens of small, fast-moving drones into the void. They scattered in all directions, scanning for any sign of movement. But as soon as they left the dreadnought's perimeter, they began vanishing from the screens. One by one, their signals went dark. Far away in the shadows, the Valkyrie was picking them off. The Helios lance sliced through the fragile machines like paper. Elias didn't waste full power on them, just enough to make sure none of the drones sent anything back. Each kill was clean, silent, and final. Drones eliminated. Marin reported. No survivors, no transmissions escaped. Elias leaned forward slightly. Good. Time for the next strike. Take their mobility. The Valkyrie shifted again. The Wraith drive bending light and radiation around it. It came up on the dreadnought's aft quarter, just outside the defensive turret range. Target their primary engine cluster. Pulse shot. Aim to disable, not destroy, Elias said. The Helios lance charged with a low vibration that the crew could feel in their bones. A flash of pure white light erupted in the dark. In less than a heartbeat, the beam hit the dreadnought's massive engines. One of the three main thrusters went dark instantly. Debris and vaporized metal drifting away into the cold. The alien bridge shuddered. Systems screamed warnings in a dozen languages. Korvac slammed his fist down. Find them! He roared, but no one could. His crew looked terrified. Not because they thought they might lose, but because they knew they didn't even understand what they were fighting. Elias ordered the Valkyrie to reposition again. This time, he didn't move far. Instead, he let the dreadnought spin slowly, exposing its ventral side. The alien ship had thick armor everywhere, but Elias knew every warship had weak points, and his database had every blueprint and structural scan humans had ever stolen from the Shar Dominion. Target point Delta 7, Elias commanded Marin. Brought up the coordinates, a maintenance port leading to the ship's reactor conduits, normally well protected, but now exposed in the chaos. Ready, she said. The Valkyrie fired again. The beam didn't explode on impact. Instead, it drilled a clean, glowing hole deep into the ship's underbelly. The shot was surgical, cutting into critical systems without igniting the reactor. Yet, inside the alien vessel, lights flickered as power grids rerouted. Life support dropped briefly in several sectors. The crew scrambled to repair the damage, but every time they moved resources to one system, another went down. It was as if the human ship was cutting the Tsar Jewel apart one nerve at a time. Korvac realized the truth then. The humans weren't trying to kill them quickly. They were dismantling them, stripping away every layer of defense, every advantage until the dreadnought would be left helpless. He made a decision. Arm all missiles, load them with nuclear warheads, detonate in widespread. We will burn the space around us until we find them. The order was desperate, but the crew obeyed. Massive missile bays opened, dozens of warheads locking into launch. Tubes from his hidden position, Elias watched. His lips tightened slightly. They're going for saturation fire, he said. Shift us to polar orbit above them. Weapons, aim for their missile bays now. The Valkyrie dropped into position and fired before the Zarjal could launch. The Helios lance cut through one missile bay, detonating the warheads inside before they ever left the ship. The explosion ripped across the dreadnought's flank, sending shards of burning metal into the void. The second bay sealed automatically, but Elias didn't give them time to recover. Shift and fire again, he ordered. The Valkyrie disappeared from one position and reappeared at another in less than a second. The second missile bay exploded, just like the first, filling space with deadly silent debris on the alien bridge. Smoke and emergency lights filled the air. Crew members coughed and shouted over alarms. The air was heavy with the smell of burnt circuitry. Korvac could feel his control slipping, not just over the ship, but over his own crew. They had seen the impossible, and fear was becoming stronger than discipline. Elias leaned back in his chair, eyes still on the tactical display. Engines crippled, sensors gone, heavy weapons mostly destroyed, Marin reported. They're trying to reroute power, but they're bleeding systems faster than they can save them. The captain's voice was calm, almost quiet. Good. Let them try. The more they fight, the more they'll realize they're already dead. In the silent darkness, the Valkyrie circled again, unseen, patient, and merciless. The hunt was far from over, but the kill was inevitable. In human space, there were no second chances, and there was no escape. The bridge of the Tsar Joel was no longer the place of quiet control it had been when the dreadnought first crossed the border. Now it was chaos. Warning sirens wailed, lights flickered, and the smell of burnt wiring clung to the recycled air. Crew members shouted over each other as systems failed one after another. Admiral Korvac sat in the center of it all, his hands gripping the arms of his command chair so tightly that the metal groaned. He had fought in dozens of campaigns, seen fleets burn and planets fall, but nothing had prepared him for this. This was not war. This was something else. Something colder. A voice suddenly cut through the noise. It didn't come from a come request. It didn't pass through their encryption system. It simply appeared, echoing across the bridge speakers. It was human, low, steady, and calm in a way that was more frightening than any shouted threat. You crossed into our home without permission. The voice said, you will not return. The sound froze the bridge. Even the alarm seemed quieter for a moment. Every crew member turned their heads slightly, as if trying to see the person speaking. But there was no image, no source, no signal trail to follow. Korvac snarled, trace that voice. But his communications officer looked pale. Admiral, there is no source. It's inside the system. Korvac's mind raced. If the humans could enter their systems without triggering any defense, they could do anything. Disable weapons, vent the atmosphere, even detonate the core. The voice spoke again, still calm, still steady. We offered you a warning at the border. You ignored it. Now we speak only once more. A pause, heavy with silence. This is where you end. Korvac slammed his fist on the chair arm. I will not be hunted like prey. Lock every weapon, sweep fire across all quadrants, find them. His officers obeyed, and the Tsar Jewel's massive batteries lit up the void. Plasma bolts and railgun slugs tore through the darkness in every direction, but none found there mark. Out beyond the range of those desperate blasts, the Valkyrie watched in silence. Captain Elias sat forward, his hands folded loosely. His crew worked like shadows, quiet, precise, each person knowing exactly what to do without needing to be told. They're scared, Lieutenant Marin said. Watching the alien firing patterns, they're wasting energy. Their reactor is straining just to keep up. Elias nodded. Fear makes them sloppy. Let's push them further. He tapped a control on his chair. Patch me into their systems. Again. A moment later, his voice was flowing across the alien bridge, the same way it had before. You are not the first to try. You will not be the last. But all who cross this line share the same fate. Inside the Tsar Joel, crew members glanced nervously at each other. Some of them were whispering. Korvac could feel morale bleeding away. It wasn't just the damage. It was the fact that they were fighting something they could neither see nor predict. Every alien in that room now believed they were dealing with a predator that had already decided they were dead. Korvac tried to rally them. Humans are flesh and bone like the rest of us. He shouted, they bleed, they die. But his words felt weak, even to him. The Valkyrie made its next move. The ship jumped from one invisible position to another, skirting the dreadnought's firing arcs. It locked onto the Tsar Joel communications array, already damaged but still flickering with partial function. With a single clean shot from the Helios lance, the entire array melted away, leaving nothing but a twisted skeleton of burnt alloy. The alien dreadnought was now completely cut off. No messages could leave, no reinforcements could come. Array destroyed, Marin reported. Elias leaned back. Good, now they know they're alone. Inside the Tsar Jewel, the bridge lights dimmed again. For a few seconds, Only the emergency strips glowed faintly, casting long shadows across the walls. Then one by one, the ship's internal speakers came alive. Every deck, every corridor, every compartment heard the same human voice. "This space is ours. You were warned. Now you will serve as a message to the rest of your kind." The voice was never raised, never emotional. And somehow that made it even worse. Some alien crew members began to break, small signs at first. Glances, the tremble in a voice, the hesitation in obeying orders. Then it became clearer. Officers were snapping at each other. The dreadnought's crew was unraveling. Elias watched it happen from the tactical display. His scanners didn't just read ship systems. They also tracked movement patterns inside the alien vessel. He could see the erratic activity, repairs abandoned halfway, squads running in circles with no coordination. He smiled slightly. "They're tearing themselves apart for us." Korvac knew time was running out. Every second the humans left them alive was not mercy. It was cruelty, designed to break them. He gritted his teeth. "All power to forward shields. We'll make a run for the border." It was a desperate plan. But he had no better option. The Valkyrie let them try. Elias gave the order to hold position until the alien dreadnought turned its nose toward safety. Then he spoke one last time over their speakers. "Run if you like. It only makes the hunt more interesting." In that moment, the Valkyrie moved. The Wraith drive shimmered as the human ship reappeared for only a heartbeat on the edge of the Zarbul's vision. Just long enough for the alien crew to see the sleek, predatory shape. And then it vanished again. Korvac's breath caught. He had seen ships before. Thousands of them, but nothing like that. There was no wasted line, no decorative plating. Just a shape designed for one purpose, to kill. He didn't know it yet. But the humans had just made their deadliest promise. They would not stop until... The Zarjo was nothing more than drifting wreckage in the cold dark. And every alien who heard the story would think twice before setting a course toward human space again. The Zarjul's engines roared to life, their deep vibration shaking the length of the dreadnought. The ship began to lurch forward, slow at first, then gathering speed as the helm officer pushed the throttle toward maximum. The border of human space was still far away. But Korvac clung to the hope that if they could just break through the invisible line, the hunters would stop chasing them. But human space did not work that way. Out in the black, the Valkyrie slid silently in the opposite direction, curving into the dreadnought's path. Captain Elias had no intention of letting them escape. He studied the alien vessel's movement on the tactical display, reading it like a predator reading the panic in its prey's stride. "They're committing everything to forward motion," Lieutenant Marin said. "Engines overheating. Shields at 70%, rear defenses minimal." Elias nodded slowly. "They're trying to flee. That means we control the battlefield. Helm, shadow their trajectory, weapons. Target their rear shield generators." The Valkyrie moved without sound, without light, the Wraith drive bending its presence out of reality. The alien dreadnought could have had every sensor in the wide galaxy pointed behind it and still would have seen nothing. Inside the Zarjul, Korvac barked orders. "Keep forward shields strong. Ignore everything else." His officers obeyed, funneling nearly all remaining energy to the bow. But that left their rear wide open. Elias waited until the dreadnought was fully committed to its escape vector before giving the command. "Fire!" The Helios lance flared. Like a needle of white sun, piercing through the black, it slammed into the rear of the dreadnought with surgical precision. The shield generator exploded in a silent blossom of debris, and the ship's aft defenses went dark in an instant. On. The alien bridge, the blow nearly threw officers from their stations. "Rear shields offline!" One shouted. Korvac cursed. "Rotate the ship." But turning meant losing forward momentum, and in that hesitation, the Valkyrie struck again. This time the beam tore into the starboard thruster, ripping it from the hull in a burst of glowing fragments. The Zarjul spun slightly, unable to keep its escape course. Elias's voice was quiet, almost conversational. "Engines crippled. They're not going anywhere. He gave a nod. And the Valkyrie darted away, disappearing into the black again, circling for another strike. Korvac knew they were being toyed with. The human ship could have gone for the kill already, but it didn't. It was striking in ways designed to wound, to take control piece by piece. The dreadnought was like a cornered animal now, still deadly, but bleeding out. "Admiral," one of the tactical officers said, his voice trembling, "permission to surrender?" The bridge went silent for a heartbeat. All eyes turned to Korvac, who glared at the young officer with something between rage and disbelief. "You would surrender to prey?" He growled, "Humans are nothing," before he could finish. The ship shuddered violently. Somewhere deep in the vessel, another section had been gutted. Lights flickered again, and the environmental systems dropped for a moment, leaving a thin frost on every surface before heat returned. That frost was no accident. Alias's voice filled the bridge again, not through the CUM system, but through every wall speaker, every helmet link, every auxiliary channel. "Every breath you take in this place is a gift we have not yet taken from you." The voice said, "Every second you remain alive is because we have allowed it. You chose to enter our home without permission. You chose your end." A murmur spread among the alien crew. The dreadnought's strongest officers began to understand. There would be no negotiation, no bargaining, no mercy. On the Valkyrie, Elias kept his focus. "They're breaking internally," Marin observed, watching the alien crew movement patterns through life sign scans. Multiple sections refusing orders, repairs slowing down. Their reactor is running hot. "Push them harder," Elias said. "Helm, bring us along their ventral axis. Weapons, take out their starboard weapons batteries." The Valkyrie darted underneath the massive dreadnought, its dark hull sliding in the shadow of the enemy ship. The Helios lance fired again, cutting through the thick armor to the banks of plasma turrets along the starboard side. Explosions lit the underside of the alien vessel, sending molten shards spinning into space. The alien crew screamed over damage reports. Fire suppression systems failed in several sections, leaving corridors choked with smoke. Automated bulkheads slammed shut, sealing off dying crew members from the rest of the ship. Korvac felt his stomach twist as he realized how quickly his mighty dreadnought was being dismantled. Elias didn't stop. The Valkyrie reappeared on the port flank and fired again, targeting smaller but critical systems, navigation relays, sensor relays, docking clamps. Anything that could give the Tsar Jewel even the smallest advantage was cut away. Piece by piece, from the outside, it looked like a predator taking careful bites out of its prey, each one leaving it weaker, slower, and more helpless. Korvac's voice cracked with fury. "We still have our forward batteries. Aim them at anything you see." But there was nothing to see. The human ship was everywhere and nowhere. Then, for the first time, the Valkyrie let itself be seen. It shimmered into visibility just 3 kilometers off the Tsar Jewel's port side. The alien crew stared in silence. It wasn't like any warship they had ever encountered. Sleek, sharp, stripped of anything not meant for killing. Every line of its hull spoke of speed and precision. The dreadnought's gunners rushed to target it, but before they could lock on, the human ship vanished again. And in that moment, every alien on board knew the truth. They weren't looking at a ship. They were looking at their executioner. Elias leaned back in his chair. "They're ready for the end," he said quietly. His crew didn't cheer, didn't speak. They all knew the hunt was almost over, and soon the Tsar Jewel would be nothing but drifting wreckage in human space. A silent warning to all who dared to cross the border again. In the silent dark above the crippled Tsar Jewel, the Valkyrie waited, invisible, patient. The alien dreadnought hung in space like a wounded beast. Its engines crippled, its weapons gutted, its crew scattered and breaking. The great predator of the Shar Dominion had been reduced to prey. Captain Elias stood from his command chair, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Every glowing outline on the map told the same story. The Tsar Jewel was dying. They have no sensors, no comms, no maneuverability. Lieutenant Marin reported. Reactor output dropping. Backup systems failing, they're bleeding out. Elias's expression didn't change. Good, it's time to finish this. But even as he spoke, he knew the final strike was more than just destroying a ship. It was about sending a message that would travel across the stars, one the Shard Dominion would never forget, one every alien power would whisper about before even thinking of crossing the human border again. Inside the Zargul, Admiral Korvac stood alone at the front of the bridge. His officers still clung to their posts, but their eyes told the truth. They had already accepted defeat. The constant, invisible strikes had shattered their courage. The humans had taken away their ability to fight, and with it, their will. Korvac's voice was hoarse. "We fight until the end," he said quietly, "even if it takes our last breath." That was when the lights on the bridge flickered again, not in random surges like before, but in a steady, deliberate rhythm, a pattern. It took the crew a moment to realize it was a sequence of pulses, and then the human voice returned. This time not only in the speakers but vibrating through the very walls. "This is your last moment," the voice said, calm as ever. "Your name, your ship. Your Dominion will remember this as the day you learned that human space is not a place you can enter and leave alive." Korvac's jaw tightened, his fists curled. His pride screamed at him to shout defiance, to swear vengeance. But the truth pressed against his chest like cold iron. There would be no vengeance. Only the void. Out in the black, the Valkyrie moved into position for the kill. The Helios lance was already charging, but Elias wasn't aiming for a quick, brutal detonation. No, the strike would be precise, surgical, and final. Target the primary reactor containment ring, he ordered. Split the ship clean in half. The Valkyrie dropped its cloak for only the briefest heartbeat, just long enough for the Zargul's bridge crew to catch sight of it again. A sleek phantom, edges glowing faintly with heat, then gone. It was like a predator locking eyes with its prey before delivering the bite. Korvac saw it, and for a fraction of a second, his mind betrayed him with a single alien thought. Beautiful. The Helios lance fired, the beam of blinding white light erupted from the black and struck the exact midpoint of the dreadnought's spine. The ship's massive armor plates glowed, then split apart like melting ice. The beam cut through hull, decks, and systems in a single unbroken sweep. Inside, bulkheads tore open, corridors vented into the void, and entire sections of the ship went dark forever. The sound, though silent in space, was deafening in the minds of those who felt the vibrations through their decks. Korvac gripped the arms of his chair as the bridge tilted. Gravity failed, and several officers were thrown against walls. Sparks rained from damaged consoles. The air smelled of burning insulation and ozone. The beam didn't stop until it had carved through the entire length of the ship. Then, slowly, the Zargul began to drift apart. Two massive halves of what had once been the pride of the Shard Dominion now floated separately, connected only by clouds of debris and frozen vapor. On the Valkyrie, Marin's voice was steady. "Structural integrity gone, reactor containment breached. The Zargul is finished." Elias gave a short nod. "Hold position, no survivors leave." The human warship didn't move in for rescue, didn't even close the distance. It simply lingered in the dark, watching as the alien dreadnought systems flickered out one by one. Inside the shattered vessel, Korvac stood amid the chaos. His officers clung to consoles or drifted in zero-G, staring out at the black void beyond the cracked bridge viewport. The human ship was nowhere to be seen, but its presence was everywhere. One of his junior officers whispered, "Admiral, why didn't they just kill us at once?" Korvac's voice was bitter. "Because this is worse. They want us to understand before the end." Elias allowed the wreck to linger for a few more minutes. He knew the fear would be greater if the aliens had time to feel the inevitability closing. Then, finally, he gave the order. "End it." The Valkyrie decloaked one last time. Emerging from the darkness like a phantom made solid, The Helios lance fired again, this time straight into the exposed reactor of the larger half of the dreadnought. The explosion was massive, a bloom of white light that swallowed both halves of the Zar-Jol in seconds. When the light faded, there was nothing left but drifting fragments, spinning slowly in the void. The blackness of human space swallowed them completely. Marin glanced at her captain. "Message sent, sir." Elias's voice was calm. "Yes, and it will be carried far. This will be told in every war council, in every fleet briefing, in every backroom whisper. They'll know if you enter our space without permission, you don't return." The Valkyrie re-engaged the Wraith drive, fading from sight once more, and slipped back into the endless dark, leaving nothing behind but the silent remains of the hunters who had thought they could become masters here. In the cold silence that followed the destruction of the Zar-Jol, human space returned to its usual stillness. No patrols arrived, no scavengers came to pick through the wreckage. In this part of the galaxy, word traveled faster than ships, and the fate of those who crossed the human border was a warning loud enough to keep even the most reckless captains away. The Valkyrie drifted in the shadow of a dead moon, its hull blending seamlessly with the blackness. Inside, the crew worked with quiet efficiency. There was no celebration, no boasting. Every person on board understood that this was not glory. It was duty. Captain Elias stood alone in the observation deck, the stars stretching endlessly before him. He could still see in his mind the exact moment the Zar-Jol split apart under the Helios lance, the white flash swallowing what had once been the pride of the Shar Dominion. He did not feel satisfaction, not in the way most would think. What he felt was certainty that the humans had done exactly what needed to be done. "Lieutenant." Marin approached quietly, her boots barely making a sound against the deck. "Report from Intelligence Command just came through," she said, handing him a thin tablet. Elias glanced at the data. The intercepted alien transmissions were already coming in from other sectors. Stories of the Zar-Jol's fate had spread in less than a standard day. Each telling was more exaggerated than the last. Some claimed the humans had dozens of invisible warships. Others swore the Valkyrie could pass through solid matter. Elias didn't correct any of them. Myths were useful. "They're scared," Marin said simply. Elias nodded. "Good. Fear is more effective than fleets. It keeps them from testing us again." Far away, in the capital chambers of the Shar Dominion, a council of warlords met in uneasy silence. The holomap before them showed the border of human space marked in harsh red. Admiral Korvac's name was already etched into their records as lost in action. But everyone in that chamber knew the truth. He had been hunted and destroyed. Not in open battle, but in a game of shadows the humans played better than anyone. One of the younger warlords slammed his fist on the table. "We cannot let this insult stand. A single human ship should not be able to destroy our finest dreadnought." An older warlord shook his head slowly. "It was not the ship alone. It was the way they used it. We do not understand their weapons, their technology, their tactics. Until we do, we cannot face them." Rumors were already spreading through the Dominion's lower ranks. Captains refused patrol assignments near the human border. Merchants diverted trade routes to avoid even passing close. The red line on the map was becoming, in their minds, a wall back on the Valkyrie. Elias walked through the silent corridors, stopping at the memorial wall near the crew's quarters. It was an old naval tradition. Every ship kept a list of fallen comrades, but here, there were no new names, and that was how he intended to keep it. He paused as the cum officer's voice came over the ship-wide channel. "Captain, we have detected a civilian freighter approaching the border from the Dominion side. They are broadcasting a neutral signal." Elias raised an eyebrow. A merchant, this close after the destruction of the Zar-Jol? Minutes later, the freighter came into visual range, a battered, slow-moving cargo hauler. Elias ordered the Valkyrie to remain cloaked, watching silently as the freighter slowed to a full stop just outside human space. The ship lingered there, for several minutes, then turned and left without crossing. Elias allowed himself a small, humorless smile. The message had been received, loud and clear, later that night cycle. In the ship's war room, Elias met with his senior officers. They reviewed the mission logs. The hunt had been perfect. No human casualties, no detection, no surviving enemy witnesses. The only record of the encounter would be the fragments of the Zarjal drifting in the black, and the terrified whispers of the few Dominion ships that picked up the wreckage weeks later. Marin spoke first. "Do you think they'll try again, sir?" Elias shook his head. "Not soon. They'll be busy rebuilding their pride, licking their wounds, and telling themselves they only lost because they underestimated us. That's fine. That's exactly what we want them to think. Because the truth, the part they would never tell the aliens, was that the Valkyrie was not the only ghost ship. Across human space, dozens more like her drifted unseen, each with its own captain, its own crew, each ready to become the shadow that swallowed any trespasser whole." Elias looked around the table. "We keep the border clean, we keep the fear alive, and we remind the galaxy. Human space is sacred ground." His officers nodded in silent agreement. Hours later, alone again on the observation deck, Elias watched the faint glow of a distant star. Somewhere beyond it, in the depths of the Dominion, they would be plotting, planning, telling themselves that one day they would be ready to face the humans again. He knew they would try. Eventually, pride was as dangerous as any weapon. But when they did, when the next great ship crossed that invisible line, the humans would be there, unseen, silent, and waiting, just as they had been for the Zarjal, just as they always would be. The border of human space was not marked by stations or buoys or warning satellites. It was marked by the absence of trespassers, by the empty space where invaders once thought they could pass freely. It was marked by the fear that crept into every alien heart when their nav charts told them they were getting too close. And somewhere out there, cloaked in the dark, the Valkyrie and her crew were watching, ready to make sure no one forgot the unspoken law: enter human space without permission, and you'll never return. Weeks after the destruction of the Zarjal, the debris field still drifted in the cold black, silent testimony to what happened when someone ignored the warnings. The wreckage had scattered across light hours, some pieces small as a hand, others the size of shuttle bays, but none of it intact, none of it useful. A salvager ship from the outer Dominion approached cautiously. Its crew had heard rumors of the dreadnoughts' end, but they didn't believe them. Not entirely. They thought maybe it had been ambushed by pirates or hit by a rogue asteroid. The stories about a single human warship doing this, those were just meant to scare people, weren't they? As the salvagers drew closer, they began pulling in fragments for examination. A twisted section of bulkhead plating caught their attention. The metal was scorched black, edges smooth from intense heat, but carved deep into it, as if burned in by a blade of light, were 4 words in human script. "You were warned." Alaye and the salvagers stared at the words in silence. Even those who couldn't read the language could feel the meaning. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise, one that had already been kept. They didn't even try to take the piece aboard. Instead, they pushed it away, powered up their engines, and left the wreck site without saying a word within a standard. Week, the story spread like wildfire across Dominion space. Merchants whispered it in docking bays. Smugglers told it over drinks. Naval officers heard it from their own crews. The exact details changed with each telling, in some versions. The human ship was the size of a moon. In others, it was crewed by machines that could think like predators. Some said it could cloak so perfectly it passed through solid matter. Others claimed it had weapons that erased ships from existence without leaving a trace. The truth didn't matter anymore. The myth had grown larger than the facts, and myths were harder to kill than fleets. In the Dominion capital, the War Council convened once more. The holomap of human space burned red in the center of the chamber. The younger warlords demanded retaliation. If we show weakness, the humans will grow bolder, one shouted. We must strike their border, overwhelm them before they think themselves invincible. But the older commanders were quiet. They had studied the logs, the fragments, the last transmissions from Korvac's ship. They knew this was not about numbers. The humans didn't fight like anyone else. They didn't fight to win territory or take prisoners. They fought to make sure no one ever tried again. And in the end, it was fear that won. The council voted to pull all patrols back from the human border. Officially, they said it was to regroup and study enemy tactics. But every officer knew the truth. They didn't want to lose another ship to the ghosts in the dark. Far from the political halls, on a quiet station along the edge of human space, Captain Elias of the Valkyrie stood at a viewport, watching the stars beyond the border. From here, there was nothing to mark the line. No bright beacon or patrolling fleet, just emptiness. But everyone in the galaxy knew exactly where that line was. Lieutenant Marin stepped up beside him. Orders from command, she said, handing him a sealed packet. Elias opened it, scanned the contents, and gave a single nod. New patrol sector farther out. Marin smiled faintly. They're moving us? Elias shook his head. They're spreading us, she understood. The Valkyrie was only one of many Wraith-class ships. Each patrolled a different section of the border, never in the same place twice, so that no one could ever predict where the hunters would strike. As the crew prepared to depart, a small, unmarked courier ship approached the station. It carried no weapons, no military markings, only a sealed diplomatic capsule. The message inside was brief and unsigned, written in a rough translation of human language. We will not cross again. Elias read it once, then passed it to Marin. She chuckled. Looks like the point was made. Elias's expression stayed neutral. Until someone forgets, and they always do. The Valkyrie departed the station in silence, vanishing into the void before it had even cleared the last docking marker. The Wraith drive engaged, bending light and space around the hull, and the ship was gone, just another shadow in the endless black out there. Beyond the stars, the Dominion would rebuild, train new admirals, design new dreadnoughts, and one day, one of them would look at the red line on the star maps and convince themselves they were ready. They would believe their new weapons could pierce the darkness. Their new armor could withstand the unseen beams. When that day came, the humans would be waiting. They always were. The border of human space was not defended by walls or fleets. It was defended by silence, by fear, and by ships like the Valkyrie, ships no one ever saw until it was far too late. And so the law remained, unspoken, but absolute. A truth etched into the minds of every captain in the galaxy. Enter human space without permission, and you will never return.